Hey guys, this is Ash and you're watching WriterGAsh. So welcome to my April wrap-up slash Orilium Spring Equinox wrap-up. So Orilium Spring Equinox is part of the Magical Readathon and we just had our first full semester. So last year this readathon started. I'll have all of G's information down in the description box so you can look up yourself because she does a really great job of describing this readathon. It's magical, it's mystical, and it is just so immersive. To the point where I now have 2 full bullet journals dedicated to it. Bullet journal number 1 basically has like history of Orilium information about the creatures in Orilium, about the different guilds, the callings, and then a little character profile. And then the other thing I included in this is my guild headquarter where I can keep track of all my points through the different years. And it's just really fun. I also created an overview page where I can keep track of what each semester is about. And the second one is about each semester on its own. Like I started off with a spring for year 1, and I'm gonna have like autumn year 1 and all of that. I've got a full like spread for this, like the courses I took. So initially I was struggling with my calling, and at the start of the readathon, I'm gonna be honest, I'd already figured it out, but I still wanted like to try read for the other callings that I was between, even though I knew what my calling was. I just wanted to do it for fun. And at the end of the readathon, I realized I still have 5 days where I could read more books. So I decided to finish reading every book on the syllabus. There were 14 courses on the syllabus, and I read for all 14 of them. I read a total of 30 books, so I also read for 14 quests. So how this works is there are courses you're supposed to read for, and there are quests you can either like get. So there are limited quests where they only accept limited mages, and I won one of them, and that was because it was for my calling specifically. It was only for mind menders. By the way, my calling is mind mender. I'll talk a bit about my character in a minute, but a little bit about. So I got that one, and then I did all of the unlimited quests. I'm going to talk about every book because this is a wrap-up. Obviously, I'm going to talk about them, but yeah. So let's talk a little bit, a tiny little bit, because I'm thinking of doing a video showing you guys my bullet journals for the spring and for the readathon in general. So yeah, because this is something I plan to participate in every semester, which means for the next 3 years. And I know this is a commitment, but I'm excited to make that commitment right now. Anyways, so my character's name is Ashlyn Monterre Glowdew. I randomly picked last names, but Ashlyn is a air and fire earthling, and her father is an air earthling, her mother is a fire earthling. And initially that was all I had. Like I didn't have any other thing figured out about my character, but as a semester approached, I was like, I need to get to know my character better to decide her calling, really. So I was like, okay, let's think about her history. And then I realized I can't think of my character's history, her life, unless I decide on, create a family for her. That's her foundation, that's important. So I created a twin brother whose name is Jax Monterre Glowdew, a father, Callan Glowdew, and a mother, Nissa Glowdew. I gave them all professions, and her twin brother is at Orilium with her, but they live their separate lives. And I'm only following Ashlyn because she is my character. He's just a supporting character, so I'm not playing as him. So he's not once, like I've done nothing for him and I don't plan to. He's just like a supporting character. And I also ended up, again, I wasn't planning. About the middle of the month, I was like, how can my character not have friends? So I created friends, and I created a little friend profile. I've got this page. I've got all their guilds, all their callings. I've got little like portraits of each of their friends. I'm gonna create a like flip through of the journal and you guys can see it then. But I'm also writing like little stories for everything. So at the end of the equinox, now that it's over, I'm gonna finish writing what happened during the equinox with Ashlyn. And yeah, I think it's just, for this to be as immersive as it is, I need to put in that effort, and I am excited to do that with this readathon. That's why I got my second book. This one currently only has like the information about the spring equinox. I'm gonna add in the story for the spring equinox, and then from the looks of it, this is probably only gonna fit year 1 and 2, maybe not even year 2. So we'll see. At the end of August, we'll see how much of this book we have left. If not, we'll just get a new one next May. Sorry, not May, April. But anyway, let us just dive into this video and talk about the fantastic books I've read this month. Like I mentioned, I read 30 books, 28 of which were for the readathon, 14 for classes, and then 14 for quests. What I'm gonna do is talk about books I read for each class first, and then we'll talk about the quests. And yeah, 30 books is a lot to talk about, so this might be a little bit on the longer side. So let's look at all the amazing books I have read this month. First, the first book I read this month was Wonderment and Death. It is a novella slash shorter story that was part of the In Death series. I gave it a 3-star, and I read that one for Elemental Studies, which was to read something under 100 pages. Like I said, it was like a short novella. The next book I read was Throne of Glass, which was for Art of Illusion. I gave it a 4-star, which apparently, I thought I gave it 5 stars the first time around. And I loved it just as much. I gave it a 4-star. It was really enjoyable. I did a book talk on it, so I'm gonna link it up in the card above so you can check it out. I love this series. I love Selena Sardothian, and yeah, so Selena is an assassin who was a slave in a salt mine, and she is brought to participate in a competition to become the king's assassin, and that is where the series starts. I'm not going to describe each book in this series because that's spoiler for the previous books. You can check out all of my book talks that I've been posting recently if you're interested in seeing what I think about them. Okay, the next book I read was Crown of Midnight, which was for alchemy, where I had to read a romance. There is a romance element in the Throne of Glass series, including in Crown of Midnight. The next was for my first quest. So the quest was Help, and you had to read a book, steal a book from someone else's TBR. So I found the readathon has a Discord where people chat and posted their TBRs, and I found someone had a book called Arc by Veronica Roth, which was 34 pages. So I was like, yes, I can add that to my TBR without killing myself. So I added it. And oh my god, I gave it a 1-star. I don't give books 1 star very often. So it was, I have no idea what I read. It was 34 pages, and I have no idea what any of those pages were. The overall gist of it was that they're the planet's about to be destroyed. They're trying to save plants or something. I was just like confused. I didn't understand the characters. It was bad. That's all I can say. It was a bad book. Okay, moving on. Next was Assassin's Blade, one of my favorite books of all time. I gave that one a 5-star. It was the first Throne of Glass book I gave a 5-star. It is the one with the 5 short stories about Selena Sardothian before Throne of Glass. So it's a prequel novella. I read that for Spells and Incantations, which requires you to read short stories or essays. This was short stories. The next was Sweet Hand, which was for shape-shifting, which was to read a book with a creature with claws on the cover. There were cats on the cover, and cats have claws. I count that. See, this readathon is very much so be flexible with what you need. So yeah, I was flexible with what I needed. Okay, so the next book I read was Brotherhood and Death for Psionics and Divination, which was to read a book set in the future. Brotherhood and Death is a book in the In Death series, which is a detective novel set in 2060s. Great book. It follows Eve Dallas and Rourke. She's an NYPD detective. It's in the future. It's got a romance element. I really enjoy this series. I read 40 some of them right now anyway, so like I do enjoy it. They're like not the best, but they're good books. I enjoy them. I keep saying that. Give them a shot. It's like a good mindless read. The next book I read was Air of Fire, which I read for Restoration, which was to read a book with healers, and Air of Fire has a prominent character that's a healer. I can't say more than that without spoiling, so that's all I'm gonna say. Again, I gave this book a 5-star. I read Brotherhood and Death a 4-star, by the way. The next one was Apprentice and Death, which I read for a quest, which was for rare ingredients. And it was to read a book with the letter D in the title, Death. I gave this book a 4 stars as well. The next book was Queen of Shadows, which I read for Demonology, which was to read a book with with shadow in the title, Queen of Shadows. I gave this book 5 stars. I think this and Empire Storm are 2 of my favorite books in this series. Check out my book talk to see my thoughts on it. Okay, so the next book I read was Bet On It, which was for Fire Weasel in Danger, and was to read a book from a new to you author. This was an arc I had received, and I kind of enjoyed it. I gave it a 3-star. So this was a story where this girl lives in a small town. She had recently moved there, and this guy who grew up there comes back home when he needs to help his grandmother heal, and they start playing bingo together, and it becomes a bingo hookup situation. I don't even know how I said those words, but it was a good book, and I recommend it. I didn't love it. I didn't dislike it. So yeah. So the next book is Echoes and Death, and I read that for Scroll of Standstill. And for it, I had to read a book which was a 5-star prediction, and the reason I picked this one is because I was getting really into the In Death series again. I was like, I bet I'm gonna love the next book, and I predicted right, because I gave Echoes and Death a 5-star. The next book was Empire of Storms, and Empire of Storms is my favorite Throne of Glass book, and I read that for another quest, which was Problem Solver required, and it was to read a book featuring assassins, which, Selena. So, Assassin. It was a great book. I highly recommend it, 5 out of 5. The next was Tower of Dawn. I tandem read Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn, and I read Tower of Dawn for my calling specific quest, which was The Thirst. It was to read either a nonfiction book or a book with mental health rep. All of Sarah J. Maas's book, in my opinion, have mental health rep. They really focus on PTSD and trauma, and this was no different. This also focused on how physical healing is related to emotional and mental healing, which is why I specifically went with Tower of Dawn over all the other Throne of Glass books. All right, and then that brings us to our next book, also 5 out of 5 star. The next book was Secrets in Death, which I read for Ameliorite Sample, which was to read a book with a purple cover. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 star. It is also part of the In Death series. It was a great book. I really enjoyed it. And then that brings us to the final book I initially planned on reading for my classes, and it was Kingdom of Ash. So this one I read for Conjuration, and it was to read a book with Source of Light on the cover. And as you can see behind me, I've got the Nerdy Ink covers, but they're like stars and like mural of the sun. It's got Source of Light on the cover, so I picked that one. At this point, I got really into the quest and trying to get points, and it was time to really read for my quests. And I was actually all caught up with everything, so I was desperate for them to release new quests. and I joined the readathon that was going on, and I basically did all the unlimited quests, but I decided to go with start reading the Heartstopper series because what's it called? There was a lot of buzz going on about it. The TV show had just come out, everyone was reading it, and there was going to be like a Heartstopper study session in the Discord group. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read it. So I got the first volume from my library before realizing Webtoon had all of them. So I read the first one from my library, which, by the way, the only reason I did that is because right before the 24-hour readathon, there was another quest called The Missing Spellbook, which was to read a book borrowed from a library. So Heartstopper Volume 1 was my borrowed book. The next one was Volume 2 of Heartstopper, both of which I gave 4 stars. So during the 24-hour readathon, I think I read for 8 hours straight. It was a great readathon. I really enjoyed these characters. They were so sweet. It's about 2 boys in high school who find each other. One of them has like known that he's gay for a long time. The other is just coming to terms with his sexuality. It's a story, a coming of age story. It's a story of him coming out. It's a story of mental health struggle. There is a lot going on, and I highly recommend this. Anyway, so the second one I read for Combat Training Friend Needed, which was to buddy read a book. In the Discord, I posted, hey, is anyone planning on buddy reading Volume 2? I'm just doing it. This is the new quest that came out. And immediately I found someone. We buddy read it together. It was fun. And then the third quest came out, and I read, like, I counted Empire Storm for that. So I used the Volume 3 Heartstopper for Party, which was to read a book with more than 1 point of view. And we get both Charlie and Nick's point of view in Heartstopper, especially starting like later volumes. And then there was the 4th Heartstopper volume, for which I read for Familiars, which was to read a book that would make you cry. This was also one of the quests that was announced during the readathon, the 24-hour session during the live stream. And I was like, oh, is it gonna make me cry? And then when I was reading the 3rd one, I was already bawling. So I was like, yeah, it's gonna hit me harder. And I read 4 and I cried like a baby. And then I was like, I need to read everything related to Heartstopper. I was in a craze about it. And I was like, I need more quests that would fit it. I need more quests. But I didn't find a quest right off. But I did read Heartstopper mini comics, which I managed to fit in for a class later on, for an extra credit class. And when I was done with everything, I went back through all the books I read that month, and I'm like, okay, I need to make sure I count something for everything because I want my guild to win the guild wars. So I ended up counting the mini comics for Animal Studies, which was to read a quick read. It took me 20 minutes to read this book, so I counted it. Okay, so, but the next quest that I was working on was to read a translated book, which was for help needed. And I went to the Discord. The Discord has been a great place for me this month. I've really enjoyed being part of the Discord community and meeting all of these amazing people who are also participating in this readathon. And I asked, hey, do you know any quick like reads for like translated books? They were like, oh, most mangas are. Am I saying that right? So I looked up mangas and I found one. I should have known by the title I wouldn't like it, but I was like, oh, it's gonna be a gay romance. I love sapphic romances and I'm probably gonna enjoy it. But it was, I married my best friend to shut my parents up. I gave it a 1.75 stars because I couldn't give it a 1 star. It was bad, but it wasn't as bad as Arc. There was a story. So I gave it a 1.75. I would have given it a 1, but I was just feeling a little generous, I guess. It was a really short manga. Finished it within 30 minutes. I was looking for standalone mangas, which is why I got stuck in this. But hey, learned my lesson. And basically, this is about this girl who's being pressured to get married. So she basically, to shove it in her parents' face, pretends to be married to her best friend. They do a civil union or whatever, and then they fall in love. I didn't like the portrayal of lesbianism in this book. As someone who's part of the queer community, it just felt off. It didn't feel genuine. It didn't feel... I don't know, it made me uncomfortable. Like, really, really uncomfortable. Anyway, moving on. So the next quest, and the last question, 24-hour readathon, was the Moth Wrangler Required, which I had to read a book with butterflies or moths on the cover. This one was a little bit harder to find, but I found this book, A Million Quiet Revolutions, and it was also a really cute romance of these two boys who were both trans, trying to like find their way in this world. They're both high schoolers, just about to graduate, when one of them has to move somewhere else because of something that happens in this book. I loved the story. I love these characters and I loved the journey. I gave it a 3-star. The only trouble I had with this book was the way it was written. It was written kind of in prose, and there were points where I was confused which character's perspective I was reading from. Their voices sounded very similar, and it wasn't separated by headers saying, oh, we're switching from this perspective to the next. So which made it a little bit harder to like enjoy it, but it was still a pretty quick read. And then I read the rest of the Heartstopper stories. So I found out that the Heartstopper series has a spin-off called Solitaire, which is about Charlie's sister, Tori. And it's got a prequel, not a prequel necessarily, like it's got a 0.5 a book on Goodreads, and then a 1.5. So I read this winter first, which I read for Artificiary, something set on Earth. It was set in London, so England, so it was on Earth. So this book, I loved this book. I think I gave it a 5-star. I think it's the only short story I've ever given a 5-star other than Assassin's Blade. And the reason I gave it a 5-star is because the first one, so we get the same day from 3 different perspectives: Charlie, Tori, and Oliver is Charlie and Tori's little brother, and that alone made me give it a 5-star. It was the most adorable thing to read from a 7-year-old's perspective. His innocent view of the world, just heartwarming. And it also like warmed my feet into reading from Tori's perspective in the next book. Next, I read Solitaire, which I gave a 3.5 star. And I read that for Inscription, which was to read something intimidating. I was worried about switching from Charlie to Tori because I really loved Charlie's story. And I was worried that I wouldn't enjoy Tori's as much, because she is very much a side character in the original webcomics, and these are real books rather than webcomics. And like these short stories are one thing, but to commit to an actual novel, totally different. But I still really enjoyed it. I was just a bit confused at points. Like the whole Solitaire plot point was a bit confusing, which is why I gave it a 3.5 stars. The next one I read was Nick and Charlie, which I read for astronomy, to read something on the top of my TBR. As you can guess, after reading Heartstopper, Nick and Charlie was on the top of my TBR, and I gave it a 3-star. The reason for that, though, is because this was set in the future-ish, not too far in the future, right? It could be like a cute epilogue. No, it had very relationship changing moments. And yet there was a whole missing chunk from where volume 5 would fit in. I think if this book had come out after volume 5, it would have been so much better. If I had waited to read it until after volume 5 came out, it would have been so much better. But it was out, so I read it. And I was like, I needed volume 5 to fill in the gaps. I'm reading volume 5 currently on the webcomic, so I'm caught up with whatever's out there. So it's not like I'm missing something that's out there already. It's something that's just not released yet. So once volume 5 comes out, I think if you read it after, you will really, really enjoy it. Okay. Next, since I was loving webcomics so much, and one of my friends, IRL friends, recommended Lore Olympus. I read Lore Olympus for the last class, Lore, to read something inspired by mythology. And I didn't like it as much. I will be honest. I was like, oh, I knew I wouldn't like it. Why did I decide to read it? It's something to do with Greek mythology. Greek mythology is usually effed up. I don't like the Hades Persephone myth. They're making Persephone a 19-year-old. Hades is thousands of years old. That makes me creeped out. And they're making her out to be such a naive idiot. And I read volume 2. It got worse. And then I read volume 3. It got better. It might have gotten better because I got so sucked into it that I couldn't find my way out. It was just like, I would think, oh my God, this is fucked up. And then I'd be like, oh God, I'm so enjoying it. I don't know why. And I have now caught up with the entire webcomics. It doesn't count in my April reads because I did that in May. But I have now caught up with the entire webcomic. And I like season 2, episode 190, night 192. And I'm like, oh my God, I need more. I just need all of it. I can't wait. But no, like I've already talked about volume 2 and 3, but I did read another book in the middle of volume 1 and volume 2 of Lore Olympus, but I did give volume 2 a 2-star and then volume 4 a 4-star because that's when it started getting better for me. But the last book I read that was for the readathon was Dark and Death, which I read for my final quest, which was Grove Keepers Needed to read a green book. It's got a green cover and it's a book in the In Death series. I gave it a 4 stars. I really like this one specifically. So this book is very much reminded me of Castle, the TV show, because there is a killer who is mimicking the murders of a mystery writer, which was such an interesting premise. The plot points are different, yes, but I just really love the way it's written, and I love following Eve and Rourke, and I want to continue reading their story in the coming months. But I might take a break from that a little bit, maybe come back someday soon. But I've got a lot of books to read in May, especially with May being Asian Heritage Month, I think. But I'm gonna be doing 2 readathons, one being my primary readathon, but I'm also going to be trying to make sure I fit the prompts for the second one just because I want to. It just wouldn't be something I put in my bullet journal. But yeah, that is it for my April wrap up. I read 30 books and 28 of them were awesome. So that is it. And I will see you in my May TBR/medievalathon. I can't say medievalathon. I'm not saying it right. Well, see you later.